What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host, and my name is John. And this week we are back with another episode where we will be analyzing and predicting the UFC on ESPN Plus 16 card, headlined by Donald Cowboy Cerrone taking on Justin Gaethje. This card takes place in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and it features 12 fights that will be aired entirely on ESPN Plus, with the first fight starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time and the main card starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The prelims and the main card both have 6 fights on them. We were supposed to have 13 fights, but Marvin Vettori versus Andrew Sanchez has been canceled, so we will proceed with just 12 fights, and this should be a good card. And we're going to start things off right away. In the lightweight division, we have Kyle Prepolec, who is 12-6, taking on Austin Hubbard, who is 10-3. The opening betting line for this one was Hubbard the favorite at minus 230, Prepolec plus 170. Right now we are seeing Hubbard minus 135, Prepolec plus 115. So line margins tightening up, more money coming in on the dog in this one, and I agree with it. This is a very low-level fight. It's a pretty hard fight to predict. Both of these guys made their UFC debuts last fight and both lost via dominant decision. But I'll give credit to them. They were kind of brought in as lambs for slaughter. Austin Hubbard actually had multiple losses by submission, and he got matched up with an incredible submission artist in his first fight. And he actually didn't get submitted. He was put in some bad positions, was taken down, had his back taken by Duffee Ramos, was getting outstruck by Ramos in that fight too, but stayed tough and was able to avoid the submission. So that was a small accomplishment of his own. And getting over to Prepolec, he actually fought his last fight at welterweight versus Nordine Taleb. I think he came in on short notice on that fight and was thoroughly outstruck in that fight, but that was up a weight class. 70 is definitely not his typical weight class. That's why he's dropping down in this one. Neither of their performances were too bad. They didn't look like complete bums or anything like that. I don't quite know that they're UFC level or not, but I think this fight right here will definitely decide that. That's why it's a hard fight to predict, because we haven't seen these guys win in the octagon yet. There's limited regional footage on them. What I have written down about them is, so we'll start things off with Prepolec. He's the underdog, and I think that if you could bet him at maybe plus 130 or above, there was value on that line, because I slightly favored Hubbard, I believe, in this fight, maybe 55% to 45. So if you got in on Prepolec as a decent dog, I'd say that's a good play. And I'd say Prepolec's definitely the more likely one to finish. Hubbard is more likely to get takedowns, top position, maybe look for a submission, but Hubbard's more decision-based. He did have a finish on his record before he got in the UFC, but it was in like the last 15 seconds of the fight. Hubbard has actually gone the full 5 rounds before. He struggled with takedown defense. He got taken down by Park, and he's got, of course, taken down by Ramos. He got taken down by Eric Wisely and grinded out for all 5 rounds. So Hubbard's weakness, I would definitely say, is getting taken down, put on his back. Prepolec actually struggles with the same weakness as well, so I think whoever really is able to dominate the grappling in this one should be able to win the fight, because on the stand-up it should be pretty close. I gave a slight edge to Prepolec, so I'd say we either get maybe a Prepolec knockout in this one or a Hubbard decision. I'm going to, I guess I'll side with Prepolec to get the finish in this one. I believe I put it down a bet on him around plus 145, and I definitely beat that line by about 30-40 cents, so it's looking like a decent bet, but I'm not in love with it. I'm not too invested in this fight, and it's not a confident pick at all. So we'll move on to the next fight in the bantamweight division. Luis Smolka, who is 15-6, taking on Ryan McDonald, who is 10-1. The opening betting line for this one was Smolka the favorite at minus 230, McDonald plus 170. We are seeing now Smolka minus 235, McDonald plus 195. So two-way action coming in this fight. Actually, at one point, the early action came in on Smolka, and it was at a pick'em for a little bit a few weeks ago when the line first came out, which is absolutely shocking. And then since then, a ton more action has come in on Smolka. So I guess maybe that early action came in on Smolka or on McDonald. People were fading Smolka and had those low limits on the books. But once the limits opened up a little bit, you saw that heavy, sharp action come in on Smolka. And I do think it's the right side. I think that Smolka is obviously the more proven fighter. He's fought and beaten the better competition, and he probably has the better overall MMA game. He's just fighting a younger guy in McDonald, doesn't have as many losses, only has one loss actually, and that was in his last fight, which came by the hands of Chris Gutierrez. He was just outstruck in that fight for the most part. He got leg kicked, he got outboxed. I think he even maybe got taken down once or twice, got his takedown stuffed, so it was not a good performance from him. Smolka, though, also coming off of a really bad performance. He was just completely outclassed by Matt Schnell, was getting outstruck in the feet, lit up with punches, and then he got taken down with a body lock. He almost got guillotined, and then he got eventually got triangled and choked out with that one. So he was just beaten on the feet, outstruck. He looked slow. He looked like he didn't want to be in there. It looked like he knew that things were going bad by the first couple of punches that he landed. But I will give Smolka credit because his last win was over Sumajari, and he came in that fight. He took Sumajari down. He was looking to get the top position. He struggled a little bit getting top position, but eventually got the back take. He landed great ground and pound, almost finished him with ground and pound in round 1, and then eventually got the submission in round 2 via armbar. So it was a nice win, and especially after Sumajari's last performance over Sukumtat a few weeks back, that win looks really good. But Smolka, he is very inconsistent, and he has had some personal problems. He's not been in the best physical shape for some of his fights, and he did not look in good shape last fight versus Schnell. So I definitely would not lay the chalk on Smolka at minus 200, and I wouldn't bet him really as a favorite at all. I'd definitely say that it's a dog or pass situation where it's at right now. I understand why some people are trusting Smolka, but I just can't with how bad he looked in that last fight. I do think he wins the fight. I do think he possibly gets a submission. That's really Smolka's go-to way of winning the fights, is submission. He could ride out top position to get a decision, but at some point I think Smolka probably gets the submission in this one, but it's still going to be a pass for me in the betting window. Not even throwing any action on McDonald, because I just don't even see, I mean, maybe it'll be a good live betting spot on McDonald if he's able to withstand the grappling attack in round 1, but other than that, it's going to be a pass for me on this fight, and the pick is Smolka submission. Next fight in the featherweight division, we have Skelly, who is 17-4, taking on Jordan Griffin, who is 17-6. The opening betting line for this one was Skelly, the favorite, at minus 130. Griffin, the slight underdog, at minus 115. Right now, the line has flipped. We are seeing Griffin minus 140, Skelly plus 120. So, two-way action coming on this fight. Jordan Griffin actually got pushed up to a dog early. Plus 125 is the highest he got, and then steadily that action has come back in on him. And again, with those early limits, people came in on Skelly early, and then the sharp money, once the limits open up. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you might be only able to bet $100 or $50 or $200 on most books when the lines first come out. But after a few days and the lines settle, you're able to bet multiple hundreds or possibly even thousands of dollars on the money lines, and that's when you see the more line movement come in. That's when you see the better bettors. Sharp bettors is what most people call them, not better bettors. That sounds ridiculous, but that's when that sharp money comes in and it pushes the line a little bit more. So I agree with the line movement in this one. Getting Griffin at that plus money was sweet, and congratulations to anybody who did so. Where the line is at now, it's looking like more of a pass for me, honestly, because I think either guy could win this fight. It's a wrestler versus wrestler matchup. Skelly, he's got that long, tall, lanky frame, especially for featherweight, man. This guy just has one of the weirdest looking bodies and builds I've ever seen. And his striking is not good anywhere. His defense is really poor. He's super hittable, and his offense is almost non-existent. He doesn't really throw anything with too much technique or power. He's really looking to close distance, get those takedowns going, possibly look for a submission. But he's getting towards the end of his career. He's only had about one fight in the past 2 years. He's coming off of 2 losses in a row. And that fight against Moffitt, he looked like he got gassed out after the first round, honestly. And he was he got put on bottom versus Moffitt, and Moffitt had like 3 Darce wins in a row, and Skelly still let him set up the Darce and lock it in, and eventually that fight ended in controversial fashion. But I don't see any problem with the stoppage. The referee was asking if Skelly was okay. He wasn't moving. He was in a choke. The referee stopped it. It didn't look like Skelly was quite out, but I mean, he wasn't moving in a choke. And when the referee shook his arm to get a reaction out of him, he didn't respond. So it could have been like one of those Lawler-Askren situations, who knows, but I didn't see anything wrong with the stoppage. I think the referee was right to stop it at that moment. But I think that getting over to Jordan Griffin, he had a pretty tough debut. He took on Dan Ige, who's a really skilled fighter. I rate him super highly, and he had a really competitive fight with him. I think he was the better striker versus Ige in that fight, but he just really struggled with the takedown defense and the top position of Ige. His cardio looked good. I mean, he was ready to scramble, stuff takedowns, hit his own offensive takedowns, throw a lot of strikes, and he impressed me in that fight despite losing that fight to Ige via decision. So I think that Skelly will be the one looking to initially hit that offensive takedown, but I think Griffin's takedown defense and scrambling ability will be good enough to avoid getting put on his back, avoid getting his back taken, put in any of Skelly's submissions, and I really trust Griffin's cardio in the rounds 2 and 3 to run away with this fight. So I think Skelly will be pressing the action, looking for the takedown and submission in round 1. I think Griffin defends, is able to stay on his feet, outstrike Skelly at range, or maybe he loses round 1. I'd say Griffin probably loses round 1, but Skelly will probably be gassed out again in rounds 2 and 3, and Griffin will be able to stuff the takedowns a little bit easier, maybe end up in top position himself, outstrike Skelly on the feet, and possibly even get a finish, because Skelly's cardio drop-off is pretty steep, and I think even Jason Knight knocked him out. So I'm going to pick Griffin to get this one done. I leaned for him to get it done by decision, but it's kind of hard to imagine Skelly making it all the way to the 15 minutes, and I think that goes the distance is at like plus money right now too. So it's more likely that Griffin gets the finish, but the official pick is going to be Griffin to win 29-28 decision. The next fight takes place in the bantamweight division. We got Brad Katona, who is 8-1, taking on Hunter Azure, who is 7-0. The opening betting line for this one was Katona, the favorite, at -185, Azure +145. Right now we are seeing Katona -165, Azure +145. So the line has bounced back and forth. There's two-way action coming on this fight, and I think the line should be a little bit closer. I think that Azure is a really live dog in this spot, and I've got one unit on his money line myself. I think this fight really comes down to the takedowns of Azure on the Contender Series versus Okan. He really impressed me in that fight, and early versus Okan, he was getting outstruck, got hit with a few punches, decided to switch up the game plan, start looking to pressure himself, get Okan on his back foot, try and land in takedowns. He wasn't successful with the takedown in round 1, but in rounds 2 and 3, he was dominating Okan on the mat, getting takedowns, getting back takes. Started outstriking Okan on the feet too. When he was moving forward, pressuring, he was landing good strikes and started to eventually outstrike Okan. And the one thing that I didn't like from Azure is his top position, his submission game, his control didn't seem that great. He was going for a lot of chokes and submissions on Okan, but just couldn't get any. And he did get signed on the Contender Series from the decision. He just showed a very well-rounded game, and that's why Dana signed him. But it would have been nice to see him get the decision in that one, or the submission in that one, because he's going to look to take down Katona. Katona has struggled with takedowns before. He got taken down by Matthew Lopez. He got out-grappled pretty thoroughly last fight by Merab. He has struggled getting off his back. He maybe likes to play bottom a little bit too much, look for elbows from the bottom and submissions off his back. But I think Azure will be looking to get takedowns, will probably get Katona down, and it really comes down to if Katona can get back to his feet, stay clear of any submissions, and then outstrike Azure on the feet, because on the feet it should be pretty close, but I think Katona should be a slightly better striker, And I think that Katona should be the favorite in this fight, maybe minus 130, minus 150, because he's been in the UFC before. He's picked up some decent wins. He's gone the distance. He's shown a pretty decent, well-rounded game, and he's really only lost to really good fighters. But the fact that he was taken down by Lopez, the fact that he had a competitive fight with Lopez and was struggling with the strikes of Lopez and really got outstruck and outgrappled by Merab too. I think that Azure is definitely the value side of things at plus 145 here. So I think that the cardio edge, the grappling edge goes to Azure, the striking edge for goes to Katona, and it really comes down to the scrambles and the takedown defense of Katona. And I'm going to side with Azure in this one. I think Azure is able to get the takedown. He has a very good pace. He was able to go a hard 15 minutes versus Okan in the Contender Series, so I'm trusting he's going to be in good shape here, prepared to go the full 5, wrestle a lot, and I'm going to pick Azure to win by decision. The next fight takes place in the bantamweight division as well. We have Cole Smith, who is 7-0, taking on Miles Johns, who is 9-0. The opening betting line for this one was Johns the favorite at minus 175, Smith the underdog at plus 135. Right now we are seeing Johns minus 130, Smith plus 110. So more action coming in on Smith's way, and I agree with it. And both of these guys I think are impressive, honestly. I think this is a very good fight. It should be an exciting one. I think it'll really come down to the takedowns and the cardio in this one. Similar to the last fight, it's going to be a very grappling-heavy fight. On the feet, Johns has some very interesting striking. He's very heavy on his lead leg. He has a decent right hand, but he throws his 1-2 a little sloppily. He leans way too far over his front foot, and it's pretty untechnical the way he strikes. But luckily, he's not facing a great counterpuncher or anything. He's taking on Smith, who had a good showing in his first fight versus Gagnon. He was able to defend takedowns versus Mitch Gagnon. He hit his own takedowns. He was able to get a back take in that fight. He did get briefly dropped or briefly rocked with a left hand in that one versus Gagnon, which is a bit of a worry. And that's why I think that Johns' best path to victory would be an early finish in this one. He probably wants to look to catch the chin of Smith early. He does have decent power in that right hand, and he looks good in round 1, but Johns' cardio, it has a pretty decent drop-off. In his fight on the Contender Series, in rounds 2 and 3, he was gassed bad. He was still getting top position. He was able to outgrapple, outstrike Richie Santiago to a comfortable decision, but he showed a lot of weaknesses in that fight. He was going for really low percentage chokes, and he was losing position, and his cardio looked bad. He looked a little bit desperate for the takedowns at the time. Luckily, he was fighting a gassed low-level fighter as well in Santiago. But I think that Cole will actually have the better cardio in this one. And I think that Cole has the grappling scrambles and abilities to put Johns on the bottom in rounds 2 and 3 and win those later rounds. So the prediction for me is going to be Johns is going to come out strong, be aggressive in round 1 versus Smith. Smith's going to look to clinch up, defend strikes, maybe hit his own level change. But even if it stays on the feet, I think Smith is going to be smashing that lead leg of Johns, because as I mentioned, Johns super heavy in that lead leg, very boxing heavy attack, and Smith showed a good calf kick versus Gagnon in that fight. So Smith also showed very good cardio versus Gagnon too. So I think Johns is going to outstrike Smith in round 1, maybe hit his own offensive takedown, but I think Smith will get up. He won't stay in a bad position. I think Smith starts to take Johns down. He starts to outstrike Johns in rounds 2 and 3, and Smith runs away with the decision, possibly even a late finish. So the pick for me is going to be Smith to get the decision win, 29-28 in this one. And I also have a 1-unit bet on Smith at plus 120. Moving on to the next fight, which takes place in the heavyweight division. The last fight on the prelims, we have Augusto Sakai, who is 13-1-1, taking on Marcin Tybura, who is 17-5. The opening betting line for this one was Tybura, the minus 135 favorite, Sakai, slight underdog at minus 105. Right now we are seeing Tybura minus 120, Sakai plus 100. So two-way action coming in on this fight, and you know why? It's it's a heavyweight fight. These guys, I'd say, are both pretty mid to high level. You only can get so high level at heavyweight, but they're both pretty well rounded. Sakai is primarily a boxing attack. He throws the occasional kick as well, maybe the front kick to the stomach and an occasional leg kick. But he has decent takedown defense. We've seen him defend a few takedowns against not so high level wrestlers, though. I think he stuffed some takedowns of some shitty takedowns of Arlovsky. He stuffed a takedown of Coronado on the Contender Series, but he did get taken down one time by Coronado with a nice powerful double leg, but he got his back to the cage and he stood back up to his feet right away, and he finished Coronado that same round. So getting over to Tybura, he is another well-rounded heavyweight. It just seems to let you down consistently. With that fight with Derek Lewis, he was winning that one. He got knocked out in the third round. Shamil, last fight, he was the favorite coming into that fight. It looked worse than he ever had. I swear, when he was walking out for that fight, I said Tybura looked sick. Like, his face, he was like sweating and gray. It looked like he had like diarrhea or something. I don't know what was going on in that fight, but it showed in the fight. He looked slow. He looked one step behind Shamil. He got outstruck by Shamil and knocked out in the second round. So I don't know what that performance is about. It might be an anomaly. Tybura could come back in this fight looking real good. But from what I've seen lately, I've seen Sakai look pretty decent. He picked up that split decision victory over Arlovsky last fight. Very close decision. Could have gone either way. He picked up that round 3 finish over Sherman in his debut. So I've seen some good things from Sakai. I think that on the feet, this one should be real competitive. I give the punching edge to Sakai and the kicking edge to Tybura. And then in the grappling realm of things, I think Tybura has the better takedowns, has the better top control. He can get top position and kind of stall out on top. But I think that Sakai's takedown defense is good enough to avoid any takedowns. But if Tybura wins, it is by takedowns. If this fight stays standing, I think Sakai will have the better volume over 3 rounds and will outstrike Tybura. But if Tybura mixes in the takedowns and gets Sakai on his back, I think that's how he wins the fight. So from what I've seen lately, I just cannot pay that favorite price at Tybura. I'm not saying I'm betting Sakai because it's not that great value. It's plus 100, a 50-50 type of fight. I do agree with the odds. It is that type of fight, maybe even a slight lean to Sakai. I haven't locked in a play on him yet, even though I am picking him to win the fight. I'm going to go with Sakai to get it done by decision. Maybe the decision prop will be a little interesting. Maybe a live bet will be interesting if Tybura looks bad again. But so far, no bet, but the pick is going to be Sakai to get it done by decision. Moving on to the main card portion of the card, starting things off in the light heavyweight division, we have Misha Cirkunov, who is 14-5, taking on Jimmy Crute, who is 10-0. The opening betting line for this one was Crute, the favorite, at -145, Cirkunov plus 105 underdog. Right now we are seeing the line flipped. Cirkunov, the slight favorite, at -115, Crute -105. So interesting line movement in this one, and honestly I understand why, because Crute got down to I think as low as maybe, let's see, -230 at one point. So if you got in on Cirkunov at his highest price, which was maybe plus 170, that's an extremely good bet. And I honestly think that you have a chance at cashing it because Crute's ground game is a huge weakness, and you might think that, hey, he out-grappled Paul Craig. Well, yeah, he did, but he did that in a very sloppy manner. He was getting taken down, was getting put on bottom, and then he would wait and then explode out of position and reverse position on Craig. He was using a little bit of technique, but it was mostly strength, and it was mostly capitalizing on the timing and the sloppiness of Craig's grappling. So it was a sloppy back and forth grappling fight. They were both on bottom a lot. Crute did have some nice position reversals, but he's not going to be able to do those against Cirkunov. And in fact, if he does that same shit, he's going to get choked out. because Cirkunov is the much better grappler on the floor by a wide margin. I mean, even though it's black belt versus brown belt, don't get it twisted. Cirkunov's MMA grappling is way, way better. He's tapped out the better competition, fought the better competition over by far. So on the feet in this one, I think that Cirkunov should be the more technical striker, although Crute has some massive power. His right hand has got some pop in it. He just knocked out Sam Alvey in his last fight with that punch. Nice counter right hand to just completely floored Alfie, and then he finished up with some ground and pound for the finish. And Cirkunov is a bit chinny on the feet, man. He's been knocked out a few times before. He's looked good in fights before, like Teixeira. Then he got taken down. He got put on bottom and then stuck on bottom and then finished with ground and pound. So he's had winnable fights that he's lost before. And, I mean, we got to talk about his last fight. Cirkunov's fighting Johnny Walker. Bet on him myself as an underdog, I know a lot of people did. We're feeling good about the bets. We're feeling good about getting the takedowns and the submission on Walker. But what do you know? Flying knee to the face, and Cirkunov gets knocked out. So it's entirely possible that Crute gets the knockout early. Maybe gets his own submission. No, he's not going to submit Cirkunov. Maybe Craig gets the early knockout in this one. Maybe he grinds Cirkunov out for the full 15 minutes because he does probably have the better cardio at this point. He's young. He's like 23. He's making massive improvements fight to fight. And it's hard to bet against Crute because he's so athletic, so strong and powerful that I think that he can win this fight, even though he's the less technical fighter by far. But the way I see it going is Crute's takedown defense is really bad. I mean, Craig was getting him down with some pretty weak takedown attempts, like desperate grasping for ankle takedowns, and Crute was still getting taken down. And that's where Crute ended up reversing position because Craig was being so desperate and untechnical with the takedowns. Crute was able to easily reverse them once he finally got them. But Misha is going to be a lot more technical. He's going to use good takedowns. He's got good wrestling. He's going to probably get mount, side control or something, and maybe get Crute to try to power out of the position. He's going to take his back. He's either going to get a guillotine or a rear naked choke. So the pick is going to be Cirkunov to get it done by first round submission. But if this fight goes past maybe the 7.5 minute mark, I'm going to say that Crute probably takes over in the later rounds. Maybe gets top position, maybe gets a late finish on Cirkunov in round 3 or wins the decision. So it's a close fight to pick. If you got in on Cirkunov at that plus money of any kind, that's a great bet. I don't know if I would bet him as a favorite here because it is a 50-50 fight. It is a tough one to pick. Crute can certainly win it. I think Cirkunov might be a great live betting spot. Crute might come out strong in round 1, win round 1, and then Cirkunov could take over rounds 2 and 3 and get this late takedown and submission. That's possible too. So I think Cirkunov gets the victory, and that's going to be my pick. The next fight takes place in the middleweight division. We have Antonio Carlos Jr., who is 10-3, taking on Uriah Hall, who is 14-9. The opening betting line for this one was Antonio Carlos Jr., ACJ, minus 195, Uriah Hall, plus 155. Right now we are seeing ACJ minus 250, Uriah Hall plus 210. I don't see too many people refer to Antonio Carlos Jr. as ACJ, but I think it comes off the tongue nicely. I like it as a nickname, so I'm rolling with it. So on the feet in this one, Hall should be the better striker. He's pretty much a striker by nature. He's got real good power in his hands. He's got great kicks. He actually had a really good jab going versus Paulo Costa before he got knocked out in that fight. But he stood toe-to-toe with Costa and traded punches for a good 8 or 9 minutes before he went down in that fight. So no shame at all in that loss. He went out on his sword, and he actually bounced back with a great victory over Bavon Lewis in his last fight. Was getting outstruck in rounds 1 and 2 of that fight, but was just looking for an opening the entire time, as he always does. Comes back in round 3, lands an overhand right, and knocks Lewis out. Lewis was fighting a great fight. He was barely making any mistakes, and then he made a big crucial mistake. He leaned too far. Uriah Hall countered and knocked him out. So that's the type of fighter Uriah Hall is. He did that same thing versus Jocko. He got hurt bad versus Jocko. He got taken down in that fight. And then, what do you know, in round 2, comes back, lands that overhand right, and knocks him out. So Uriah Hall can come back from losing. He's done it multiple times before. And I think that's what he's going to have to do in this fight early, because unless Uriah Hall knocks Antonio Carlos Jr. out in round 1, with some crazy strike or something, which is possible. I think Antonio Carlos Jr. wins round one pretty easily. Carlos Jr. is a world champion black belt. He's got some of the best submissions in the UFC, great top control, pretty good wrestling to go along with it. You see a lot of jiu-jitsu guys not have great wrestling to get their fights to the ground, and what good is good jiu-jitsu if you don't have good wrestling as well? But Carlos Jr. does have a good takedown. He can get fights to the floor. He can tap out experienced black belts like Eric Spicely. He's taken down and tapped out multiple of his opponents. The rear naked choke is really his go-to move, and that's really what this fight comes down to. Is Carlos Jr. is going to be looking for the takedown. He's going to relentlessly be looking to take this fight to the floor, and only guys with really good takedown defense like Ian Heinisch and Marvin Vettori have been able to avoid the submission. Daniel Kelly withstood the early attack from Carlos Jr. and knocked him out late. Patrick Cummins was able to out-grapple him about 5 years ago in his first couple fights in the UFC. So Antonio Carlos Jr. is not unbeatable. You just have to withstand the early grappling attack. You have to have good takedown defense. You have to stay on your feet, because if this fight goes to the ground, Carlos Jr. is going to do what he wants with Uriah Hall. Don't get it twisted. No matter how good Uriah Hall's defensive grappling is, I really doubt it's going to be good enough to avoid the submission of Antonio Carlos Jr. So unless Hall can stuff takedowns, land hard punches on the feet in the early rounds, it's going to be hard for me to pick him to win this one. Now, Carlos Jr. does gas out later in rounds. When he can't get that takedown, he will work super hard for the takedown, and he will gas himself out doing it. And that's what happened versus Ian Heinisch. That's what happened versus Vettori too. But in Vettori, he dug deep in round 3 and was able to win that last round by just getting in top position a little bit more than Vettori. So I could see a scenario where Carlos Jr. wins round 1 with the takedowns, but Hall survives. Round 2 is more competitive. Hall starts stuffing shots and outstrikes him. Then it could really come down to that third round, and maybe Hall continues up the momentum and wins the last 2 rounds for the decision, or maybe Antonio Carlos Jr. comes back in that third round after losing the past round and wins the third round like he did versus Vettori. There's a lot of different possibilities for this fight, but the most likely scenario I see happening is Antonio Carlos Jr. getting the takedown in round 1 and getting the submission, probably by way of rear naked choke. So the pick is going to be Antonio Carlos Jr. to get it done by first round submission. The next fight takes place in the welterweight division. We have Michel Perreira, who is 23-9, taking on Tristan Connelly, who is 13-6. The opening betting line for this one was Perreira, the minus 320 favorite, Connelly plus 240. Right now we are seeing Perreira minus 600, Connelly plus 450. So not too much to say about this fight. It's a very short notice replacement. It was supposed to be Perreira versus Kondoskov, but Kondoskov got hurt. And now Connelly's filling in. He's a former lightweight. He's fought and beaten some pretty decent competition. He's fought the full 5 rounds before. He goes for finishes. He's seems like a pretty decent fighter, but there's one big glaring problem, and there is no full fight footage online of Connelly. You could buy one of his fights on Fight TV or something like that for like $15 if you really want to study this fight. You can do that one, but I don't really care about this fight enough to dig that deep into it. I tried to listen to look at some highlights of him or watch old fights, but I'm telling you, Connelly, there's so little footage of this guy. There's none on Yoku. There's none on YouTube or Vimeo. I was looking all over the place. I did find an interview with him from James Lynch from a few days ago. He seems to know what he's up against. He knows that he's up against a big, powerful, flashy striker. He knows he has to withstand the early storm in round 1, look to tie up Perreira, look to clinch him, get takedowns, and drag him into the later rounds, and look to submit him or get the finish somehow in rounds 2 and 3. And that's the right game plan, but it's a big if he can survive round 1, because Perreira, as you know, he had an impressive UFC debut. He landed the flying knee knockout over Danny Roberts. It was an incredible performance in that one, and he really has incredible flashy striking, and he uses it effectively. I mean, this guy throws 110% in every strike. He has incredible innovation in the cage, I guess you could call it. He's running off the cage and doing backflips and doing tumble kicks and all types of stuff that you don't see from any other fighter. But you might think it's bullshit. You might think it doesn't work. But when he fought Todorovic, he wasn't using any flashy techniques. He was trying to outstrike him with just the bread and butter strikes. But he was unsuccessful. He got outstruck by the more technical guy. He was getting pressured, hit with punches, and he eventually got TKO'd in that fight versus Todorovic, who actually just came off the Contender Series and looked pretty good. I think he got himself a contract. But Perreira throws a massive speed, massive power. He throws flying knees, spinning kicks, hard right hands. I mean, he throws power in his right hand. So I just don't see Connelly being able to withstand that. I mean, he's a former 55er. He has 6 losses on his record in the regionals. He's coming in on here on like a week's notice. And even though he seems to have fought decent competition, he might actually have a decent UFC career at 55 in the future. I think he's up against it a little bit too much in this fight, and I think Perreira gets that first round knockout, probably with the right hand. Maybe we were fortunate enough to see some more flying and spinning shit from Perreira, because his first fight in the UFC was fucking awesome. That knockout over Danny Roberts was one of the knockouts of the year. So the pick is going to be Perreira to get it done by decision, but if Connelly is still standing after round 1, live bet Connelly. He will be live if he survives round 1. Maybe even pre-fight bet Connelly rounds 2 and 3. The next fight takes place in the heavyweight division. We have Todd Duffee, who is 9 and 3, taking on Jeff Hughes, who is 10 and 2. The opening betting line for this one was Duffee minus 170, Hughes plus 130. Since then, the line has flipped. We are now seeing Hughes minus 125, Duffee plus 105. So I don't know who the odds maker who set Duffee at minus 170 is, but he might have been drunk, because Todd Duffee is coming off of a 4-year layoff. 4 years, has not fought since July of 2015. So that is a huge red flag. And you could think, I think it might have been a USADA problem. And what I really know is it's injuries. He's had a series of injuries. He's had surgery on both of his knees. He tore his ACL as recently as 2015. And he apparently has like a neurological disease, and I'm sure he's got problems with getting knocked out as well, suffering 3 vicious knockouts in his UFC career, or in his MMA career, excuse me. But Todd Duffee's fighting style is a typical heavyweight, or what you'd expect from a heavyweight. He blitzes you in round 1, tries to knock you out in the first minute. He stands in the center of the cage and trades punches. He's not very technical. He throws sloppy punches. He doesn't have good defense. He's kind of chinny. He's very hittable. I mean, he threw one of the worst punches in UFC history versus Frank Mir, got countered and knocked out. And 4 years is a long way to be away from the sport. And even though Jeff Hughes isn't the most technical fighter himself, he hasn't been very dominant in his UFC tenure. He actually lost a split decision to Maurice Green last fight. Because even though I had him winning the fight, it was a low output affair, and when it's a low output fight like that, you give room for the judges to coin flip the cards, and that's what happened in that fight, and he paid the price for being low output. So even though Hughes, I think, won that fight, he got robbed on the scorecards, and that was a lesson that he had to learn in that one. I'm sure he'll come out much more aggressive in this one. So even though Hughes looks like a kind of a fat, chubby, slobby fighter, he's technical. He's got good boxing. He can stuff a takedown. He can hit his own offensive takedown. And I think he's the much better fighter than Duffee at this point in their careers. So it really comes down to if Hughes is prepared for that early storm, because Duffee's game plan. He's coming in here to try to knock you out in round 1, and if Hughes is looking to strike with Duffee, he's giving Duffee his best path to victory, and that would be getting that early round 1 knockout. What Hughes wants to do is he has to be prepared for that early storm. He either has to bite down on the mouthpiece and throw hard punches at Duffee back and try to knock Duffee out, which is possible because Duffee's defense is terrible, and he fights super uncoordinated, and he looks like he's just throwing bombs out there. And but if Hughes would be smart to look to hit a level change, maybe look to clinch Duffee up, make him tired, with not having fought in 4 years and only having 3 fights in the past 7 years, Duffee is not used to fighting. He's going to have some nervous energy in there. He's probably going to gas out. And if he can't get that knockout in the first round, Hughes should dominate the fight, probably finishing Duffee at some point. So I would say Duffee has a decent chance of getting that first round knockout. Maurice Green came out and was super aggressive in round 1 versus Hughes, and he outstruck him pretty handedly in round 1. But Hughes' output dropped off in rounds 2 and 3, and that's when he started to get outstruck. So Duffee's going to come out Hughes strong, and I think that Hughes is crafty enough, he's smart enough to be able to avoid that attack. But I think that Duffee has, I'd say, a 40% chance at knocking Hughes out in round 1. Other than that, though, he has no chance of winning the fight. His cardio is going to drop off. He can't. He doesn't have a much of a wrestling or jiu-jitsu game. He's not going to look to level change. He's not going to take this fight in the later rounds. Hughes will be the one winning rounds 2 and 3 if the fight goes that far. So I'm siding with Hughes, but it's not a confident pick because he is going to have to deal with that early storm of Duffee, and Duffee could certainly come in here and get a meme-style knockout over Hughes in round 1 and make us all feel real stupid. So I think if you got in on Hughes at plus money, it was a good bet. I wouldn't go too crazy with it, maybe 1 or 2 units at most, and the pick is going to be Hughes to win this fight. I'm going to go with a second round TKO. The next fight in the co-main event of the evening takes place in the light heavyweight division. We have Glover Teixeira, who is 29-7, taking on Nikita Krylov, who is 26-6. The opening betting line for this one was Glover as the favorite at -130 to Krylov, the slight underdog, at -110. And right now we are seeing Teixeira -115, Krylov -105. So two-way action coming in this fight all week. I think the early action came in on Krylov, pushing him to -145. That late action coming back on Teixeira in this one, and I think that the action on Teixeira is a little more warranted. This is a matchup that Glover Teixeira has been faced with before. He's taken on a younger, powerful guy with better striking who should be quicker and the better striker by a wide margin than him at this point in their career, like Ian Cutelaba was last fight. Cutelaba was taken into Teixeira early. He was hurting him in round 1. He rocked him with a spinning back fist. Carl Robeson used some powerful elbows to counter the takedown of Teixeira and almost had Teixeira knocked out. But in both of the Misha Cirkunov, who we discussed earlier, was beating Teixeira early, outstriking him. But then Teixeira, once he gets that takedown, once he gets that top position, man, he's got some of the most underrated top position in all of MMA. I've known very few fighters who have been able to escape the bottom position of Glover Teixeira. Maybe Phil Davis way back in the day. But if Teixeira gets you down, he typically wins the fight. He has great ground and pound, good submission games. He has great arm triangle chokes, great rear naked chokes. He'll use that ground and pound to soften you up, take the back, get the rear naked choke. That's what he did versus Cutelaba. Versus Roberson, he just got mount and went right to the arm triangle. And Krylov has struggled with submissions before. I'd say the majority of his losses in his career have come by way of submission. Let's see. I am right. He has lost by arm triangle choke twice to Vladimir Machenko. He lost by Von Flue choke to Oven St. Preux. He lost by guillotine to Cirkunov, and he got arm triangled again versus Jan Blachowicz just last year. So Krylov's sub defense has gotten better. His grappling overall has gotten better. He hits his own offensive takedowns. He actually submitted Oven St. Preux last fight. So Krylov is getting better, but when he faces those elite level grapplers, he does still tend to get out grappled. That's what happened versus Blachowicz and Cirkunov lately. And in that fight, even though he beat Oven St. Preux in the last fight, if you watch round 1 of that fight, he was taken down and he got mounted by Oven St. Preux, and he used a very risky explosive technique to get back to his feet. He just kind of powered out of that mounted position. Luckily he escaped back to his feet, but he better be careful doing that versus Glover Teixeira, because Teixeira, like I said, his top position is so great, he's going to leave no space, and if Krylov tries to explode out of there making a mistake, Glover Teixeira is either going to pound him out with ground and pound or get that submission via rear naked choke, arm triangle, possibly even a guillotine. So on the feet in this one, Krylov should be the better striker. He's going to come out in round 1 very aggressive like he did versus Oven St. Preux. he's got good fast punches. He's got powerful, quick head kicks. Krylov's striking is really good, and if he's able to fix up that takedown defense of his, if he's able to stop making so many bad IQ decisions on the ground, I think this guy could be maybe a future champion 3 to 5 years down the road, because he's still young. I think he's still only like maybe 28 years old or something like that. And if he continues improving at this steady 27 years old, that's incredible. If he keeps improving like he has been the past few years, I honestly think that we could see Krylov as the guy who is the champion in 3 to 5 years after Jones has retired and after all of the light heavyweights have cycled through. We might see Krylov at the top of the division, because he might not even have hit his athletic prime yet. And this could be the first step in Krylov's stride into propelling himself into an elite level fighter. He could come out here and dust Glover in round 1 and look incredible doing it, or he could continue up that trend of making those bad decisions, especially on the ground. He makes some bonehead IQ moves on the ground, like he tried taking down Jan Blachowicz after he got hurt by he got dropped by a punch versus Blachowicz, and then he got guillotined in that one. So I'll give him a little bit of credit in that one. But he was taking down Blachowicz in that one, but he just makes some bonehead moves on the ground. So it's hard to trust Krylov in this one against such a talented submission grappler like Glover Teixeira. But what I will say is Glover Teixeira struggled getting the takedown on Krute. He went 0 for 7 on takedowns versus Krute, who doesn't have good takedown defense. And then eventually Krute threw a kick, and he fell off balance, and Teixeira got on top, and that is when Teixeira ran away with the fight, got the mount, got the choke. So Teixeira might have trouble getting Krylov down in this one. Krylov's takedown defense might be good enough to fend off the takedowns, but with Krylov's kicks being such a vital part of his game, I see some way Teixeira getting him down, whether it's a caught kick or whether it's a takedown. I think Teixeira gets Krylov down on the mat, eventually gets a dominant position, and gets the submission at some point on Krylov. So the pick for me is going to be a second round submission from Glover Teixeira. I think the fight plays out very similar to how the Krute fight did, and pre-fight, I'm gonna pass on the Teixeira money line, especially as a favorite. If you got Teixeira at plus money, I think that's a good bet. But I think that we're gonna get a good price on Teixeira after round 1. I think Krylov comes out, wins round 1, and if Teixeira is still standing at the end of the first round, I think he takes the fight over, gets the takedown, and gets the submission. So maybe Teixeira round 1 a prop before the fight, and then look to live bet him, or maybe Krylov round 1. There's a lot of different ways to play this fight. It's a really, really good fight. It's deserving of co-main event for sure. Big fan of both of these guys. I can't wait for this one to go down, but the official pick is going to be Teixeira to get it done by second round submission. The last fight of the evening in the main event, in the lightweight division, we have Donald Cowboy Cerrone, who is 36-12, taking on Justin Gaethje, who is 20-2. Excuse me. The opening betting line for this one was Gaethje, the favorite, at minus 250, Cerrone, the plus 210 underdog. And right now we are seeing Gaethje minus 190, Cerrone plus 165. So two-way action coming in on this fight with a little more towards Cerrone, honestly. And I'm surprised. I think that this is a pretty clear matchup to dissect. And Cerrone is one of the most active fighters on the roster. I've probably broken down his weaknesses multiple times and his strengths multiple times. Both of these guys are just extremely lovable fighters. They're beloved by fans, both of them. And it's going to be a tough fight to pick because, honestly, I see Cerrone get knocked out in this one. And as such a big fan of the guy, it's hard to predict those things sometimes. But you got to be unbiased when you're breaking down these fights sometimes. Even if you like a fighter, you can pick against them sometimes. And that's what's happening here. Because Cerrone's weakness is pressure. It's when guys pressure him, don't give him kicking range, he has trouble. He does not have much power in his punches, so it's hard for Cerrone to get you to stop pressuring forward. Now, that's where Cerrone gets creative, and he uses his kicks and his knees sometimes to stop pressure fighters like he did versus Hernandez, but Cerrone versus Tony Ferguson, he was barely using kicks and knees at all to counter. Ferguson was pressuring him nonstop, lighting him up with inside leg kicks, outside leg kicks, teeps to the body, and smashing Cerrone with straight punches too. Tony Ferguson's punches are so long and fast that he was snapping Cerrone's head back multiple times throughout that fight. And what also worried me is in the early rounds versus Iaquinta. Cerrone was pretty much just boxing with Iaquinta, and he was getting outboxed for the most part. I think Al might have lost round one, although it was competitive. Al definitely won round two, and Al was landing some pretty decent punches early, and that was really all I needed to see was how hittable Cerrone was in the past two fights, because he's taken on one of the best pressure fighters in the sport, the guy with some of the best leg kicks, the best power punches. He's got incredible pressure. He's great at cutting off the cage. He gives you no space when he fights you. You have to fight Justin Gaethje in a phone book or in a phone booth, and he makes it difficult for every single guy who he fights. Michael Johnson, they had a back and forth war. He eventually knocked Johnson out in the second round of that one. He fell short versus Poirier. He had a very competitive fight with Poirier. He was winning the early rounds of that fight. His leg kicks were accumulated. It looked good for him. He threw a leg kick. He got countered with a straight left hand and got finished by Poirier. He got finished by Eddie Alvarez with a knee in the third round. He would really struggle with the body punches of Alvarez in that fight. It was, again, a fight in a phone booth, and Alvarez was digging to the body. He did great work. He was outstriking Gaethje, and he finished him in the third round. Probably Alvarez's best performance in the UFC, but Gaethje has just fought straight killers. His past two matchups, he got early first-round knockouts over James Vick. He noticed the tall man's defense of James Vick. He drew out the counters of Vick, found the way that Vick was leaning, and he threw a perfect right hand and knocked Vick out with one punch. Same thing with Barboza, just pressuring him right away. Traded leg kicks with Barboza, showed that he wasn't afraid of him, and was landing hard punches from the first 15 seconds. Like the first couple punches that Gaethje landed, you could tell hurt Barboza, and then about 2 minutes and 30 seconds into that fight, he was cutting off the cage well, and he threw a picture-perfect right hand and knocked Barboza out with one punch. So I think Gaethje's just getting into his prime right now. He's picking his shots. He's so calculated in there. You might think that Gaethje's a brawler, and you might think that he goes out there and just throws caution to the wind. I tell you, you're dead wrong. He is extremely technical. He's extremely calculated. The way that he's picked his shots the past couple fights, it was extremely impressive. He is just when he hurts you, he doesn't go crazy, and he's not open for counters. He picks his shots well. He'll leg kick you, he'll set up punches, and he'll eventually set up that one punch knockout blow, because he's got massive power in his hands. Now he does have his weaknesses as well. He can be when he got kicked to the body versus Vick, he kind of turned into Vick and took I don't even know what he was trying to do. Maybe reduce the momentum by leaning into him, but that's a bad habit. I mean, especially when you're fighting a guy with great knees and leg kicks like Cerrone, or head kicks and knees like Cerrone. If Gaethje is leaning in a predictable way, Cerrone will time a knee or time a head kick and hit Gaethje with a big powerful strike and possibly rock him. But what I'm having trouble picking Cerrone with is a big problem is the punching power. Is just Cerrone's not going to have the power to stop Gaethje from coming forward. Cerrone put a beat down on Iaquinta in rounds 3, 4, and 5, had him dropped, hurt, bloodied, battered, and he still couldn't finish Iaquinta. And it's not like he was trying super hard. He was kind of coasting in those later rounds, but Cerrone just really doesn't have very much power. He's not really the type of guy to get a one-punch knockout, a one-strike knockout. I mean, he kind of did that versus Hernandez, but that was an accumulation of damage in that one. So Gaethje, I'd say Gaethje's chance of getting a knockout in rounds 1 or 2 is like 80%, man. I really don't like Cerrone's chances in this fight. Maybe Cerrone can withstand that early storm, do good work to the body, land good counter strikes, get some respect from Gaethje, and start winning rounds 3, 4, and 5. Cerrone does get better as the fight goes on, no doubt about it. He took over the fight versus Iaquinta. He actually won the later rounds versus Leon Edwards at welterweight when they fought, but I just don't see Cerrone surviving that early attack from Gaethje. I think Gaethje marches forward, kicks the legs to Cerrone, gets into boxing range, lands hard punches, and gets the knockout on Donald Cerrone. Unfortunately, I say that as a fan of the guy. I love both of these guys to death. It should be a crazy competitive fight for as long as it lasts, but I think that Gaethje touches the chin early and knocks Cerrone out in round 1. So got a pretty big bet on Gaethje at minus 190. Happy to throw down some units on his round 1 or maybe his inside the distance line, because I think this is a tailor-made matchup for Gaethje, and it's just a nightmare matchup for Cerrone. And man, Cerrone, tough as fuck, man. There's just so much respect to this guy. He fought Perry in November. He fought Hernandez in January. He fought Iaquinta in May, and then he fought Ferguson in July. I mean, or maybe June. Yeah, I mean, the dude is just so active, fighting elite after elite after elite level competition, and he's truly a UFC legend, a Hall of Famer, no doubt. But he's in for a tough night on Saturday. I'm not gonna say I would be excited to see him pull off the upset, because I am betting on Gaethje and I am confident in Gaethje. But it would be certainly a cowboy moment for him to pull off one more exciting victory over a young up-and-coming prospect like Gaethje. But I don't think it happens. I think Gaethje gets the knockout, and that's going to do it for this week's podcast. This has been episode 75, I believe, of the Martian MMA podcast. We previewed all 12 fights on the UFC Vancouver card going down this Saturday, starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN Plus, with the main card starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, also on ESPN Plus. So I hope everybody enjoys the fights this week, and I will catch you all next week before the next UFC event. Peace.